Hello. Today I'm going to be going over the Fidelity Zero mutual funds. So, what are mutual funds? Mutual funds or index funds are similar to ETFs, and they're a collection of stocks that have been put together that tracks different indices or stuff like that. So, a popular index fund would be the S&P 500 or the Total Market Index Fund. The S&P 500 tracks like the 500 biggest companies, and the total market tracks the entire US stock market. So we have 4 of these indexes to choose from for the Fidelity Zero, and they have a unique twist because the Fidelity Zero indices do not charge an expense ratio. And basically what that means is a lot of these funds that have these collections of stocks and mutual funds and ETFs charge you an expense ratio for owning the fund. And usually this can be anywhere from like 0.03% to like 1%. But the special thing about the Fidelity Zero mutual funds is they do not charge any expense ratio. And this is very beneficial if you're looking for a way to invest in these indexes without having to pay any fees on your investments. And you can compare them to Vanguard funds that usually charge pretty small expense ratios. Usually like a Vanguard Total Market Index like VTI charges about a 0.03% expense ratio, I think. But these ones are zero. And so what's the catch? How are they able to not charge any expense ratio? Well, the catch is that these are basically just mutual funds to draw people into Fidelity and kind of to keep their money with Fidelity, because with these sort of mutual funds, you can't really transfer it away from Fidelity. And so they're kind of running at a loss in order to draw in customers to buy these funds. But for people who don't mind staying with Fidelity, which of course is government regulated and FDIC insured, so there's not much risk involved with staying with this company, then it's not too much of a downside to have these mutual funds that can only really reside in Fidelity brokerage accounts. So there's 4 of them. And the first one I'll go over is FZROX, which is the Total Market Index Fund. This one is just a very reliable, great fund. Any sort of total market fund is going to see amazing sort of returns and has limited risks. It just tracks the entire US stock market, and it's a good way to get a ton of diversification and also get a lot of just great gains as the market goes up. So if you want to purchase this fund, you'd first want to click on the trade in your app. If you're on the Fidelity app, you can click transact and then trade. And you want to search for FZROX. And this is the symbol that you would use, and then you would select it, and you can take an action. You can do buy, sell, or exchange. In this case, we would want to buy, and then you can do any dollar amount. So it is $16.54 a share currently, but you do not have to buy that much. You could put in just $10, and you'd get a fraction of this Fidelity Zero Total Market Index share, and you get $10 worth. And so this one is just a really good all-around stock to have. But of course, there's 3 more that we can look at. And so the other one would be the International Fund. If you want to get exposure to stocks that are outside of the US, this can be really helpful. I do sort of warn a little bit against buying a lot of international funds because they tend to underperform US stock market. So this is only really if you want exposure to international stocks, but you can buy FZILX, which is a total international fund. that also will have zero expense ratio, like all of these Fidelity Zero mutual funds. Yeah, and then for the next one, I think we have a large cap stock index, which is FNILX. So not Z this time, but FINLX, which is the large cap. This is think big companies like Microsoft and Apple. So it tracks mainly the biggest companies. This is something that the S&P 500 does a lot, where it takes the 500 biggest companies. This will track just the large cap stocks. And that can be really good if you're focused on just investing in mainly those large cap companies, and those large cap companies tend to see pretty good returns, at least in recent history. So this can be a good fund to buy if you're more focused on just high returns and you're willing to take a little bit more risk. And speaking of more risk, the last one is the FZIPX. We'll type that in. FZIPX. And this is the extended market. So this is kind of the opposite of the large cap fund we just looked at, where this tracks the small and mid cap stocks in the stock market. So if you're looking for exposure to those sort of small or mid cap stocks, this would be the index fund for you. So now that we've checked out all the Fidelity Zero index funds, I thought we'd take a look at a comparison between VTI, which is a Vanguard total index fund. So you can see FZROX and VTI are very similar in terms of performance. Moving down to the dividend, you can see that FZROX did not actually have a dividend before 2018. And that is because the fund is relatively new and it was actually only created in late 2018, which is why that's where the dividend first shows up. You can see that VTI has a slight edge in terms of dividend, and there are some years like 2021 where you'll see FZROX have a higher dividend, but for the most part it's a little bit higher from VTI, although they should be around the same most of the time. Now looking at the expense ratio, we can see that VTI is 0.03% and FZROX is 0%. So they are both solid options, and honestly, I don't think you could go wrong picking either of these funds. But that has been the comparison between FZROX and VTI. The other funds probably would have a similar sort of comparison to their respective counterparts that also track large blend, extended market, or the international market. They would have like slight discrepancies, but for the most part it's virtually identical, and you can check out those comparisons out on your own if you want to. But thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.